Right. So, in the last session, we have discussed about the applications. What are the different types of applications do we have? Something like web applications, client server, dynamic, distributed applications, enterprise, cloud, right? So, what are the different applications we have? We have discussed as a part of our configuration and list training program. Let me just remind you what is that I have discussed so far in the last session so that to have some idea. So configuration analyst is a kind of role where we try to analyze different types of applications we have. Uh, Depends on the kind of industry we belongs to. For example, when we are working on healthcare organizations, different applications we use, something called Facets, QNext, Health Edge, etc. Majorly by the payers for claim processing, adjudication, all that. Next, even we use applications in insurance domain, something like Guidewire, etc. Will be used to manage policies, right? So managing the claims, billing, etc. Next, you can see some other applications like ServiceNow. ServiceNow widely used across industries. Next, CRM applications like Salesforce, Dynamics, all that. So configuring an application regard to the business need, what in exactly that enterprise or an organization is required. Necessary changes has to be made in the application by making some customization is something which is required. I have given an example already. Let me give you an example again. Let's say, for example, Facets is a kind of application used widely across healthcare organizations to manage claim processing adjudication by the payer. Assume that they were already using one claims related application earlier. Now, as part of their business expansion, they are planning to use Facets application for their organization. Now, what they have to do, they need to customize this application according to their business rules, followed by the government mandates, if any. So, if you see you are a technical person, let us assume that you are from the technical background, wherein you are good at coding testing. So, your expertise in making necessary changes, especially on the application by some customization, because do remember this application is already there. Whatever the modules required, everything were there. And we are configuring according to our organization rules, according to the organization business rules. So a technical person can understand the requirements provided, if anybody given, so that whatever the customization, developing a logic for a particular customization or the requirements will be done by the technical team. But to bridge the gap between these two, you required some analyst. This is where generally the role of a configuration analyst, we call it as. You can see now and then many of the requirements we see as part of our training, even in the last session I have shown you. There are a lot of configuration analyst training requirements you can see in the in the organizations, either in the healthcare side, or it can be insurance side, or it can be of any other industry or a sector. So we require some intermediary who understand the business rules of a particular organization. This organization business rules may vary from organization to organization. It will not be the same all the time. Understanding the rules of the business rules of the organization, whatever the required customization to be made for the existing application, for that they required some analyst. This is where configuration analyst is required. Configuration analyst role is this. But provided, as I mentioned, you need to have fair amount of knowledge over the features and functionalities of the application, which will be an additional advantage. Apart from that, how this can be configured means if there are any kind of data tables or data model we have, right? So how configuration of data models we have to do, or if there is any kind of changes you want to be make in the user interfaces, right? So user interface changes. or it can be relating to workflows, right? So if you, for example, there is a business workflow for claim processing was there. So this workflow process may slightly vary from one organization to one organization. That required process has to be configured and changed according to their steps, business steps. You have to change that workflow process configuration. So these are the activities which being into a configurational list we do. This is irrespective of technology, irrespective of the domain I'm talking about. Learning configurational list is essentially required nowadays as part of technical BA roles and other roles. You can apply this even for healthcare or insurance or banking, or it can be some supply chain management. That is a different thing, right? So that is not something really important, but how this configuration and what are the steps and stages that are to be made is what something you are learning is required even. So that is what something we have discussed all these days, right? So this is what generally the role of a configuration analyst. Now, if it comes to the role of a configuration analyst, it's always important for us to understand the very basic minimum thing, what exactly application configuration stands for. So application configuration majorly allows, as I stated earlier, repeating the same, it allows customization uh, or tweaking or selecting without any recompilation of the application, because the regular structure of the application, what are the features, modules do we have, remains constant. But when it comes to the features and as well as the general behavior in context to the performance of security of the application, whatever the required changes to be made according to the business rules is something which normally we have to do as a configuration list. This is what generally the role you can see in any organizations. Now, if you want to manage configurations, because being a configuration analyst, we must be knowing about how this configuration to be managed. Now, if you want to manage any kind of application configuration, there are three basic questions you need to understand, because these are the bare basic minimum questions one can understand. So if you want to manage any kind of configurations and all everything, application configurations, we need to understand in three things. One, how are we going to represent the configuration information? That is point number one. Second, how are we going to deploy scripts and accessing it? Because if you want to understand about the deployment scripts or in the process of it, first of all, there are some types of configuration you must be knowing that I'll be discussing in the next session anyway. Because for example, if you want to develop an application configuration and all, there are different points we have to consider. How you're going to build it, right? So how you're going to deploy it, how you're going to test that, and how the release process will be continued, right? So all these things are comes under the types of configuration that I'm going to discuss with you in the next session. Now, when it comes to the managing of configuration of the application, how do you deploy the scripts and accessing it? At the same time, how does it vary between the environments, applications, versions of the applications? Because in the last session, even some time back, I told you, right? So environment may be varied. I'm talking about technical environment, because some are applications are on-premise applications. Some applications were cloud-based. So that application configuration is also required, because how this assessing the configuration is required and how this modeling of configuration to you need to do, right? So for example, if you want to assess the configuration and all, we need to understand the kind of central service which existing it has, right? So what is the central service we have? And we need to understand what are the applications that can be configured when it requires the needs and all. Next, we need to model the configuration, means you need to know about the application, you need to know about the version of the application. At the same time, we must be knowing an idea, understanding over the environment it runs. Like, for example, development or user acceptance testing, performance, staging, production, right? So these things we must be knowing. Next, after modeling, we need to test the system's configuration, because system configuration testing means whatever the required changes we have made, that has to be tested subsequently, this testing configuration. So these are the different steps and stages which generally one should understand when whenever you want to configure any kind of application and all. This is what something which normally we have to use it, and this is what something we need to do. So this is how generally being into the configuration analyst role. So as far as the application development itself is concerned, when we are working on application development or application configurations, this is what something which we need to learn. This is what something I'll be learning in coming days. That's what I said. And this is what something a configuration analyst training program is all about. And the detailed part of it, right? So how this application configurations we have and what are the different stages, as I mentioned you. All these things I'm going to discuss with you in coming sessions. This is all, right? So if you have any questions, please go ahead.